welcome to Escaping Kasterborous, the WhoCulture podcast. My name is Rich, and I'm joined by the ever-lovely Amy.
Hello.
I don't know why I say ever-lovely.
It's because I'm lovely.
Should be never lovely.
Shut up.
But we are going to be rewatching the entirety of New Who. So that's Doctor Who from 2005 to now. And every single week we'll be recording our thoughts on going back and rewatching it. Basically sort of like a semi-review / rewatch kind of thing. Because a lot of people have been asking me over on the Twitters and things when I've been doing ups and downs for Doctor Who on WhoCulture's main channel. Obviously, that will be moving over to WhoCulture, which we launched only a couple of days ago as of recording. People have been asking me to go back and do ups and downs for all the classic series and all the previous, because I've only done ups and downs for series 11 and 12 so far, so only Whittaker's era. So a lot of people asked me to go back and do ups and downs for series 1, and I don't really want to do that for a couple of reasons. One, Ups and Downs is heavily scripted, and I do the entire thing myself, so it's quite a lot of work alongside all the other stuff I do of WhoCulture. And also, I'm horrifically biased about the old series, especially as you'll hear for the first 13 episodes or 14 episodes of this series, because I am a big Eccleston fan. He is my boy. So I'm very, very biased towards Series 1, and I don't think I could give any downs ever, because I think the series is just immaculate. So I thought instead we would do a podcast where we just sit and we talk about Doctor Who. So Amy here is my partner. We've been together for 6 years.
6 years and a few months.
Got that right, thank God. My mind just went blank. It's yes, it's 6 years. And we both love Doctor Who. In fact, it was the first thing we started talking about back in the day.
Yeah, Doctor Who brought us together.
So we figured we've wanted to do this podcast for quite a long time, doing a rewatch podcast. And ever since WhoCulture became a thing, I managed to get this over with the old management. So we've just had the green light to just do this. So it's really exciting that we can just sit and talk rubbish about Doctor Who with you. And I'd love to go back and do the retrospective stuff, like I've said. And I think this is the best way to do it rather than try and overly script it. So if you are new to Doctor Who, welcome. If you are doing your rewatch, and I don't know how many times I've rewatched Series 1, this is probably my 50th time watching Series 1, then welcome. If you're new to the show, we're going to hopefully lead you through a little bit as to giving you a bit of backstory and the interesting tidbits and things, or the things that you would notice when you rewatch, because we literally just now sat and watched Series 1, Episode 1, Rose, which aired on the 26th of March 2005, which means we were both 9.
Oof, that's a throwback.
Do you remember actually watching Rose back in the day, on broadcast?
Weirdly. I mean, I know that we probably did, because my dad was sort of the person that was like, oh, have you girls heard of Doctor Who? No, maybe? Yes, well, sit down and watch it with me. So we probably did, but I feel like because I was 9 years old, I just don't really, it wasn't such a staple thing. So I didn't really ingrain it into my mind all that much. In the same way I don't remember watching the first Harry Potter film. It's that kind of reminiscent, it obviously was important in hindsight, but I don't really remember.
Interestingly, on a weird segue already, I remember watching the first Harry Potter film.
Oh, I don't.
I very vividly remember watching Quirrell turn to stone, and it scared me to death as a kid. I don't remember watching Rose either. I think I remember seeing the first advert for Doctor Who, the one of Eccleston running down the tunnel with the explosion behind him, and he's talking about trip of a lifetime.
I've never seen any of those trailers.
I need to show you that, but I remember seeing that on BBC One back in the day, and it must have said at the end when it said, Doctor Who returning Saturdays at 7, and I remember saying to my parents, oh, there's this thing called Doctor Who that's returning, and my parents watched Doctor Who back in the 70s and 80s, but they weren't super into it, unlike I'm guessing your dad was.
Well, I don't know whether he was super into it or not. I think he liked it, but it wasn't he was never a Whovian or whatever they're called nowadays.
A Whovian, yeah.
It was always just kind of this thing that was on. So it was just it was I suppose a childhood thing.
Just a weekly tea time staple, I guess.
But I wouldn't say he was overtly a massive fan. He was just kind of I watched a bit of Doctor Who back in the day.
Yeah. But I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember watching it being aired, I was pretty bad at keeping up with Doctor Who in Series 1 because when I was growing up, I was doing dance classes on Saturdays, and they were usually all the way through the day into the evening, so I don't really recall watching masses of Doctor Who. There are a couple of moments where we'll talk about in the future in the next couple of weeks on this podcast about our experiences with watching the episodes back in the day and why I managed to miss this, that, and the other. But I really picked up on the series properly about 4 or 5 episodes in. Like actually watching it week to week, but again we'll get back to that. So I think I watched Rose on my DVD release, because they released the DVDs in sections in 4 chunks of the series quite soon after the episodes aired. So I have my original 4 DVDs that are like my prized possessions, which we'll actually get to in a bit. But yeah, so we are going back and watching through all of Doctor Who week to week. So yeah, we're starting with Series 1, Episode 1.
Obviously.
Which is Rose.
Yeah.
And first things first, there's no cold open at all. You come straight in with, I would still say, is my favourite title sequence.
Just the best
the original
title sequence.
2005 sequence with the original version of Murray Gold's theme, which was, they did about 4 or 5 different versions of that theme. The original Murray Gold one, before it got completely redone in 2010. I love that title sequence to bits.
Yeah,
like
so
I said,
beautiful.
I still think it's my favourite.
It's so simple. That's what I like about it. It literally is just like, boom, space-time continuum, boom, TARDIS, boom, space-time, done.
Boom names, boom title. Let's get on with it.
Fabulous.
We will talk about opening sequences as this whole series progresses, because they change for better or for worse as the series goes on. If you're new to Doctor Who, you'll see it change alongside your viewing. But then straight away, it jumps straight in with Rose and her day-to-day, which is working at... What's it called?
Some sort of clothes store.
Begins with a H. It's not Harrods.
I don't know.
I don't remember. She works in a clothing store. She lives in London. She goes and meets her boyfriend at lunchtime, and they leave all their rubbish on the fountain.
Yeah, oh my God, I literally was like, they've just left all the rubbish on the fountain. Why?
And after Rose has done all of her thing, she has to go downstairs to give Wilson the lottery money.
The lottery money.
And that's when she first comes across the Autons, which were created by Robert Holmes back in 1974. I want to say. Spearhead from Space. It was John Pertwee's first ever episode. First episode in colour, actually. The Autons originated back then, so I think it was good that they went with a semi-recurring villain for the first episode back, because obviously, as much as this was a reboot of the show, it does continue the continuity from the 1960s to from 1963 to 1989.
Familiar enough that people who have watched the show in the past would be like, oh, these are the Autons, but also new enough for people like us who were 9 years old and new to the show to be like, oh, what's this? Living plastic.
It's scary. It's weird enough, but yeah, as you say, the people who watched it back in the day will have known, because I'm hoping that there'll be people who are listening to this who are watching the series for the first time, because the thing about Doctor Who is, especially when you talk about it now that the show's been on for 15 years post reboot.
15 years.
I know. Is that no one knows when to jump in.
Yeah.
And they get really concerned. And I always say to obviously being an Eccleston fan, I always say don't skip 9. And you shouldn't skip 9, mainly because they lead you in so well. If you jump in with Tennant,
you're going to have missed so much.
The Christmas Invasion and New Earth, you miss a lot of the build-up. So if you are jumping on this for the first time, we want to hear your thoughts on social media as well as to what you think about the show. If you're watching it for the first time, it does lead you in really well. And especially when you're going back and watching it again, there are so many nods, so many things that we will point out over the course of these podcasts that you realise, like the way that a character says a line or the way the Doctor looks at Rose in a certain way because of future events that you know about. Like we find out in the future about the past prior to Eccleston as to why he says something this way or why he's like how he is. So yeah, Rose meets the Doctor down in the basement of this shop because the Autons are coming after her. Wilson! And he grabs her hand and says, run. And we get that first little chase sequence and they end up in a lift. And there's just this kind of weird banter between them. And going back and watching this again, I realise there's a lot of the sort of Colin Baker arrogance in 9 in this first episode.
I did notice that they, like, one of the things I picked up on rewatching is, like, I mean, I haven't watched Series 1 in God knows how long, but they get on so well straight away. And I think that is, like, a really key point to their kind of like development, because at first she's literally like, who the bloody hell are you? And then literally all of a sudden it's like they're walking along the street together, they're laughing together, they're like, do you know what I mean? So
it's kind of like a very welcoming approach to the character. I think that's one of the reasons why I love Eccleston so much, is there's so much to his character. There is the fire that's there from the Time War, which again, we don't really hear about the Time War. I can't remember exactly when it is in the series that he first properly mentions the Time War.
I don't know. I feel like it's a bit later on.
It might. I think it was. I think it is actually Dalek when he's in the lift with Henry Van Statten, where he mentions the Time War for the first time. But like, there is that anger, and then you've got that whimsicality to it and the silliness. So after I'm sort of explaining through the episode, even though I'm assuming that people listening to this have just watched it as well. Rose, the Doctor blows up her job. And then she goes home, and then the Doctor shows up at the flat, and there's this really interesting thing where they introduce the Doctor as an alien, because again, if you don't really know the show, and if you manage to go this far not realizing the Doctor's an alien, then well done. They do this really clever, or it's an interesting thing that got redone a lot, not as well as the series progressed, where they show off the Doctor's sort of alienness in Rose's flat, because he's there like fannying around with a book. He opens a magazine and says he's gay, she's an alien. Because
he walks straight in and she's like, coffee, and he goes, yes please, milk, and it's like, that's the most normal human thing you would probably say, and then all of a sudden picks up this magazine and goes, that's not going to last, he's gay, she's an alien. It's like, I'm sorry, what?
Flicks through a book, supposedly can read it in 5 seconds, and goes, all sad ending. And then he starts pissing around with a deck of cards.
Like he has no idea what they are.
Up in the air, and there's a sort of this, background comedy aspect to it. And then he notices himself in the mirror, which obviously with the way he reacts to it is the first time he's seen himself after he regenerated from John Hurt. Sort of spoiler, maybe. And they do this thing where they make him alien, but they don't make him stupid, which is something that if you know the series, we already know from Matt Smith. Like, the way that they characterized his Doctor is they made him really a bit what's the word?
I mean,
I don't want to say a bit thick.
I mean, he is a bit thick.
He is a bit thick, but he has this sort of alien
it's
silliness.
The lack of understanding culture.
Yeah, and I get the Doctors are different, like, personalities, but I feel like the way that they introduced the alien nature of Eccleston here was so well done.
They humanised him so well, especially later on when he goes, lots of planets have a north. Like Rose's line about how come you sound like you're from the north, that's like a very easy way to humanise him so that you get used to him being like kind of human but kind of alien, and I think they did that really well.
It has this sort of, the banter between the two is something you didn't really see in the classic era. Like, the Doctor was very, as much as that we had pompous Doctors and we had very down to earth Doctors, but you didn't really see the companion Doctor relationship like that.
They were never particularly friends, they were more just a companion.
They literally were a companion, so seeing that new approach to the companions was also a breath of fresh air, because just the decline of Doctor Who in the late 80s wasn't solely the show's fault, because we had Michael Grade grind the show into oblivion because he hated it so much. Sadly. But the show did get stale. It got really stale. The storylines were kind of dumb. Even when looking through Survival, which is the last serial ever before the show got cancelled in 1989, it's just really kind of dumb, like cheetah people.
I mean, it's sort of one of those things of like, I suppose if like you've been running a show for how long is it, like 20 something years by that point?
Yeah, then... I mean, John Nathan Turner had been running the show for like 15 years. So it's hard for for a show this kind of that needs episodes that are so individualistic. Like, I know you can reuse monsters and things, but like every episode needs to be different. Like, you can't go to the same planet or the same plot. Whereas things like soaps, for example, have hundreds and hundreds of episodes, because how many storylines can you have about somebody getting somebody else's girlfriend pregnant? Do you know what I mean? But if you had a show like this, needs to have every single episode be different. So you would obviously become exhausted at trying to find new ways around writing different stuff. So yeah, they literally rebooted the relationship between the Doctor and the companion. Obviously, this is Rose. And yeah, there's this fantastic shot after the Doctor's been at her flat where they're walking from the flat back towards the TARDIS. And there's this shot that goes on for like maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes of just one long shot of them walking and talking.
It's really well,
and it's brilliant.
It's so nice to see that kind of. You don't get that in modern, like really up to date Who now. You don't get the kind of in that shot. You see the evolving relationship from literally when she leaves the flat door to being like, who are you? And then they get to the end of this walk, and all of a sudden it's like they're busy mates. Like that's kind of the you can see the evolution happening in front of you the further down this walk they get, and the fact that it's all one shot works really well. Whereas in like really modern Who, you like, oh, you've just met? Well, you're my best friend now, or bye.
Yeah, they don't explore that kind of relationship so much. And I think that's why Rose is so beloved, because they did give her the time of day. Like, this episode is literally called Rose. Mm-hmm. And they do everything in their power to introduce her the best way that they can. They show her sort of relationship with the Doctor. They show her curiosity when she's researching him, and then they explore the relationship between Mickey and Rose. And most of the time Mickey and Rose are together in this episode, they don't look like a very good couple, do they? Like, Mickey's quite kind of not forceful, but he has very set expectations for Rose. Like when he arrives at the flat after her job's been blown up, and she's a bit down in the dumps, but she doesn't really care. She knows what's happened, but she obviously can't say anything, or else people will die. And Mickey's like, oh, let's go to the pub, but there's a match on, that's kind of why I want to go. And then when he leaves, he's like proper like, come on, kiss me on the cheek, come on. And then he leaves, and it's kind of like...
I mean, I don't know whether that was just kind of 2005 relationships in a nutshell, though, isn't
probably.
It, really? One of the other things I really like about Rose, and it comes up quite a lot in this episode, is when the Doctor literally turns around and goes, is that okay? She goes, yeah. It's like her straight away acceptance of stuff, like, just like, oh, you're an alien. Okay, great. And I think she
doesn't doubt herself. So the evolution of her becoming this like badass by the end of series 4, it does make sense. It doesn't feel like a sudden change in her character, because she's always been very much, she will kind of believe what's ahead of her. Like, if she can see it in front of her, then she'll believe it. When she goes to see Clive, he thinks he's full of crap after he starts talking about immortality and all this sort of thing. Yeah. Like, she's not convinced, but when she sees it, she's like, okay, yeah,
now I understand.
Now I get it.
It's something that comes up in the next episode as well, and we will talk about this obviously in the next episode, but when she goes, he's blue. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, great.
Yeah, he's blue, fine. We'll just go with that. Like, I think Rose is still probably the best companion of the new era. Like, who gets a full series? Because I know that people put Captain Jack up high, and it's like, yeah, but he's not.
Captain Jack's not really a companion. I mean, he is sort of.
He's not a series companion.
He
comes and goes.
Companion.
But there's so much more to Rose, and as much as they have the universal significance plot, which we'll get to over the course of the series, for series 1 more specifically, they don't jump in with that. They jump in with, here's a 19-year-old girl.
Oh yeah, I forget she's
19. She's working in a shop.
Yeah.
She eats beans on toast, eats chips, and goes to bed.
Beans on toast.
And she's just had this random bloke just arrive and change
blow
her
up
life.
Her job.
And blow up her job and change her life forever. So it's a really good way to introduce Rose to everyone, and a new sort of variant of the Doctor to the people who know the Doctor, and then introduce the Doctor in general to a whole new group of people. Like the speech he has at the end of that long sequence, the long walk sequence, where he talks about he can feel the world revolving. Like, it's not very often that kind of approach to themselves, or the Doctor's approach to themselves, you hear that in the series. You don't, because he kind of does believe the world revolves around him, but maybe not because he's an arrogant arsehole.
I sort of feel like he takes the kind of... This is what I like about his Doctor so much, is the heaviness of his character is played really well, because obviously he's just come off the back of the Time War, hasn't he? So everything that he does is for a very specific effect. And yeah, he's an arrogant arsehole, but I think he puts that up as a kind of shield to, like, protect himself from what has actually gone on. Yeah. And the fact that he's sort of, like... He's really serious when he's like, I can feel the earth spinning, I can do this. Later, as this, like, the whole sort of New Who progresses, when you get to David and you get to Matt, you lose that. Like, David was very good at it as well. Yeah. But, like, Eccleston kind of carries that. He, like, shows it on his sleeve in, like, a very easy to grip way, but you don't know why. But, like, he's just very good at portraying that kind of heaviness. But also, it's a very, like you said, it's a very good way to introduce him to Rose and the audience at the same time. Because, like you said, you don't really get that kind of speech with anyone else. Like, David had that very good element of, like, showing it at points like when he got too big for his britches. Eccleston, I don't think, got too big for his britches, but he was always keeping himself in check by making these kind of, like, by sort of summarising to Rose, like, who he is. Like, he was like, I can't get too big for myself. Yes, I'm an arrogant prick because that's who I need to be off the back of what I've just come from.
Yeah.
But I'm not an arrogant prick in the thinking I can do anything and everything, because really, he says it himself, I'm just a man passing through. And that evolves then to, I don't know, suddenly becoming the saviour of the universe. But
obviously we're gonna try not to sort of spoil big plot points and things. I know we've mentioned like future things happening, but we're not going to go into too much detail on them, mainly because there are whole episodes and specials and things that will go through the backstory. Because the beauty of Doctor Who, especially if you're new to the series with this podcast, which would be so cool to be the people to sort of introduce you to this, because obviously I know that we're big fans of the series anyway, but even just watching that first episode back again, it's like it's also just really great drama.
It is just
drama.
Really
it's so good. And, you know, like I said, Doctor Who getting stale and being kind of silly, like it is kind of silly in the grand scheme of things. And there are moments which we'll get to in this episode that are quite funny. Some of the best gags they've ever put into Doctor Who in this first episode. But there's this grounded nature to it, and it's something that, you know, you get fans that are obsessed with things. You get it with Doctor Who, you get it with Harry Potter, you get it with Supernatural, you get it with Star Wars. Like, there is good reason as to why people get so obsessive about it, and especially with the lore, because there's so much to it. And at this point in the series, the events that transpired between the 1996 movie and now are still unknown. They're mapped out, the ideas there, because that's what Russell T Davies came back with when he rebooted the show in 2005.
Because that's one thing that I never really realised when talking about Classic Who. I didn't realise at the time war wasn't a thing. Like, that was Russell T Davies introduced that, and I think that's really, really cool.
It was to give it fuel after the events of 1990. After the events of 1996, they needed to give it something, because the way they tried to reboot it again in 96 with the movie was they just brought the Master back.
Yeah.
And the Master became really one-dimensional and just a bit rubbish. Whereas in this, they were like, they put so much more mystery behind the Doctor, which was actually something they were looking to do if the series continued into 1980 or late 1989 or 1990 with series 27. They were going to introduce the Doctor as a character called the Other, who would have worked alongside Rassilon and Omega in the formation of the Time Lord Society, which, again, judging by the current state of Doctor Who post-Series 12, is very much up in the air. And they were going to make the Doctor this, like, godlike character in reality, and it's like they've just... That thankfully didn't happen.
Yeah, thank God.
Even though Chibnall's just done it. But they were going to do so much more with the Doctor and try and, like, plonk a load of backstory behind the character in one go, which to some extent they did with Series really 2005, nicely. But they did it much more quietly, and also because there was 9 years between.
Anything could have happened.
Yeah, there was 9 years after the movie,
human years,
and like how many years after the show? After like 17? No,
something or other. 16
years after the show. Yeah, 16 years after it went off air in 1989. So they added all this lore, this mystery to the Doctor, and that's kind of the beauty of Eccleston's Doctor, especially. As you said, you get it kind of with Tennant, but with Eccleston, there is so much more mystery behind him, and that works for both, you know, solid Doctor Who fans who've come from the 1980s and came back in 2005, and for the people who are new to the series. So Rose has obviously met the Doctor a couple of times. The Doctor buggers off in his TARDIS, and she's now going to try and research him. Now, even with all the noise that was made over the course of the classic series, the Doctor's still relatively unknown. Like, the scale of things you see in Doctor Who isn't present throughout the old series. Like, the world-ending threats, they just kind of didn't really exist, probably mainly down to budget.
I feel like also that's a really good way to sort of introduce him as a character that we might not necessarily know, because you don't get this kind of overarching sense of I'm the Doctor. Like, for example, in Matt Smith's series, obviously no spoilers, but like he has these whole like I'm the Doctor, check your records speeches, whereas Eccleston is very much I'm just nobody. Like I'm not trying. Yeah. I'm not trying to be this overarching, all powerful thing. I am just somebody that you guys are going to get introduced to, and that develops throughout, like the character development into David and into Matt. Like he does slowly become this person who you sort of revere in, oh my god, he's going to save everyone. But Eccleston's Doctor is very sort of, he just happens to luck into these situations of like, oh, I just happen to be on Earth and the Nessian consciousness is here, whoops, so I'm going to try and stop it. Like, he's not really I have this duty and this responsibility. He just sort of does it because what else is he going to do?
I mean, he still stands by his moral code of, I need to give him a chance. He says about the Nestian consciousness towards the end, like, I'm not here to kill it, I've got to give it a chance.
That's one thing I love about Eccleston's Doctor is he's very, like, on the side of everyone deserves a chance. Apart from the Daleks.
But that's understandable with what happens, which again we'll get to in episode 6.
Oh, is that really episode 6?
Episode 6.
Oh, I don't want to wait that long.
I know, but we can get through it. We're gonna breeze through this while the weeks continue to fly by in the current state of affairs. But yeah, so Rose looks into the Doctor, and there's not much she can find. This is one of the first and kind of only points in the series where it's really shows its age for being 2005 because Rose goes to Mickey's and she gets on his
computer
big old beige CRT computer and goes on search-wise.net to research the Doctor, and she finds Clive, played by Mark Benton, and
wonderful actor
and Benton. a really underused character. Obviously, if you've watched, I'm assuming you've watched the episode if you're listening to this, because obviously Clive dies right at the end of the series, and his family are all a bit like, everyone who agrees with you or is interested in this Doctor is a nutter.
They obviously before he dies. But once you've been shot by a plastic dummy.
So he's like a conspiracy theorist. He's got all these files on the Doctor, and he's managed to keep up with Eccleston's Doctor. And he's not only explained to Rose who he is, but also the audience, is the fact that this is someone who is he's immortal, or it's a title passed down from father to son, but here he is back in like the late 1800s, and he's himself. It looks like him. He's got his jacket on. There he is at the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I say, funnily enough, the day before Doctor Who originally aired. The 22nd of November 1963. And then here he is back with a family before they were going to go on the Titanic, and he said don't, and they didn't. So he's this really interesting character that introduces he just plonks a bit more mystery of the Doctor onto the audience, but also it's like reaffirming to people who are coming back that this is what the Doctor is, someone who can travel through time.
Exposition. But not rubbish exposition.
It's not, let's give Jodie a spotlight.
Oh my god, look at that thing.
And everyone sits down and listens while Jodie spits out some exposition.
It's very, very well done. And that was the sort of thing that I picked up on a bit throughout this episode, is there is exposition points, but it's not horrific exposition, like literally just standing there and going, what is that blinding light in the sky? Oh my god, it's a blinding alien. Like, oh my god, like it's very much like explaining it to the characters to explain it to the audience, and it's not so obvious that that's what it's doing, which I think it obviously leads you in much nicer.
But if we go back to that walking sequence, if they'd have just shot that of like reverse shot of the Doctor and Rose in the flat, that would have been the most dull part of that. But because they went and did it in a single shot, like I don't know how many takes it took them, if they did that
so natural
and it felt natural, then people won't pick up on it as being a bad thing, because they're just walking along and talking. And as much as you will need exposition in episode 1, they do it in such a way to not make it really dull.
Feels like you're a fly on the wall, as opposed to breaking the wall, like how comedians or like TV shows will break the fourth wall. It feels like instead of being that fourth wall, you are just in the episode with them. Like there's no direct sort of exposition to the audience which they play a part in. It's literally just exposition to each other.
Well, like the companion was always the audience surrogate in Doctor Who, and this episode takes that up to the extreme because you spend so much time with the companion. Like there's not that many episodes of Doctor Who, especially in New Who, that take place primarily from the companion's point you. You get loads of Doctor episodes and you get loads of non-Doctor, non-companion episodes. But just purely companion is quite rare. And that's how they managed to get this over so well. They tell you so much in this first episode if you just sit and listen.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's when certain things happen, you can look at it differently when you know the events between 96 and now, and you know what was going to happen in the future. You can see the way that it was all mapped out. You see the way the Doctor reacts to certain things, and yeah, back to Clive. That whole section of him talking about who the Doctor is and Rose not really believing him because it's not the Doctor saying it, or she's not seeing it with her own eyes because she's not seen any. Well, she has kind of seen aliens. She's seen the Shop with No Dummies, but I think she's not entirely convinced about it yet. And she didn't see the TARDIS dematerialize after their long walk. She heard it, but she didn't see it.
As far as she was concerned, it could have been a lawnmower.
So at this point, Mickey is he's very skeptical. Like, he's not met the Doctor yet.
No.
So he's sat out in his bright yellow Beetle.
I mean, realistically, though, wouldn't you be a bit skeptical?
What?
I would be a little bit.
Oh, of Clive?
Just in general. Like, your girlfriend suddenly comes up to you and goes, by the way, I'm going to go to this random
Especially in
dude's house.
2005, like, meeting somebody on the internet was not the same as meeting somebody on the internet now.
I've been emailing him. We're talking about this dude that exists.
I mean, it's the fact she's been emailing him and not, like, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or TikTok.
Who
like all
emails anyone
these
anymore?
kids do now. So he's outside looking really skeptical, and there's this really interesting sequence of this bloke brings a bin out. That's empty, funnily enough. Why does a bloke bring a bin out that's got nothing in it?
I'm still convinced that he was an Auton. I know
Maybe.
he doesn't look like
But
it,
this
but
bloke
like he
brings
literally wheels this bin out, looks Mickey dead in the eye, just drops the bin and leaves and walks back
it's
into his
because
house.
there's a black guy he doesn't know sitting in a car on his street. He's like,
who are you?
not sure about this guy. Oh, 2005 Britain, all fun. And Mickey sees this bin and it starts like shuffling towards him. He goes over and opens it, and the bin is obviously now been possessed by the Nestine consciousness, and it swallows Mickey whole.
During that sequence, I'd love to imagine just somebody crouched in the bin running along with their feet. They cut the bottom of the bin out and they're just hopping along the street.
And Mickey gets sucked in, and then they make the bin burp. And it's like, cool. So this is the first time there's obviously a bit of humour, the dialogue between the Doctor and Rose. I forgot about this. The Doctor coming into the flat for the first time, and Jackie, Rose's mum, stood in her dressing gown. She goes, I'm in my dressing gown. There's a strange man in my bedroom.
Yes, there is.
Anything could happen.
No.
And I remember watching that episode with my dad for the first time, and my dad killed himself laughing at that line. And obviously as a kid, I had no idea.
9 years old, you're like,
no idea what that was implying. And basically it's like, there's a man in my bedroom, please do me. Poor Jackie. And you know, the Doctor being choked by the arm when Rose brings the coffees out, and he just walks past him and he's there with the arm on his neck, and he's just like, help me. She's just nonchalantly walking past him. And yeah, the bin burping is kind of silly, but when I went to the Doctor Who experience back in 2007, I went to Cardiff to be part of a Blue Peter competition. And getting to go to the Cardiff, because we did the stuff with Blue Peter in the Millennium Centre, which is the big like bronzy brass building behind the waterfall with all the words on it. That was where we did the stuff in there. And yeah, being stood in front of the waterfall, be like, A, the TARDIS has landed here, B, Torch was underneath me. Oh my god! But when we were there, me and my mum, they had the Doctor Who exhibition at, I think it's called like the Red Fox Centre in Cardiff. And this was only, like I said, this is 2007. This is series 3, so the Doctor and Martha. And in that experience, my mum went round with me, and she obviously didn't really know masses about Doctor Who, don't know how much of it she'd actually watched, but she knew that I was a big fan, so we obviously went to this exhibition. And on this exhibition, they had that bin.
Oh, did they?
They had that black
just
bin
a random
with
bin.
3 on it, because I think they had some of the Autons or the plastic dummies that had the costumes, because there were real people in there that give them like pinprick eye holes and nose holes to breathe, which must have been awful for the actors. But they had this bin. They had like the display, and then off to the right was this bin, and it was like, open me. And I was there like,
did it burp? Did it burp?
No, it didn't. And
God,
I was there like, I'm not going to open this bin. I was terrified. As much because I was a huge wimp as a kid. I was a massive wimp. And again, we'll talk about stuff in Doctor Shutter. We'll talk about stuff that scared us in Doctor Who as a kid. But this bin was there, and my mum was like, open it then. it's only a bin. I'm like, but you didn't see what it did. It ate Mickey.
So it's just going to eat you?
Mickey. So I thought something would jump out, and eventually my mum opened it, and she was like, there's nothing in here. You look in, all it was they'd angled a CRT TV inside it. If you opened the bin, they just had the clip of Mickey being eaten by the bin on loop. But the fact they just put this wheelie bin
just
with a sticker of a number 3 on it and said, boom, attraction, and put that in.
Amazing.
So Mickey gets eaten by this bin and he's replaced by a plastic replicant, duplicate of him. And Rose doesn't really notice as much as he looks really like shiny and weird. His hair's all plastic.
Yeah, you do sort of get in. It's like, has he just been dipped in wax?
It's like, Rose, look, he's really slick and shiny.
Wasn't like that when you went in.
Something's different here. But they go and get pizza. And
that's how I feel about pizza, to be fair.
Yeah, true. And so the doctor shows up. He kind of tracks. I'm guessing he's tracking plastic, or he seems to scan that someone's been replaced with a plastic duplicate, and. He launches a bottle cork, into Mickey's head, which he then spits out as he's made of plastic.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of weird fight. The doctor pulls his head off. And when he does that, there's this shot of the doctor holding Mickey's head. And there's a couple sat on a table. And Mickey's he's eyes are closed and his head's dormant. And then he opens his eyes and goes, don't think that's going to stop me. And as much as you've got the man and the woman on in frame. Now, bear in mind, this is written by Russell T Davies, who himself is gay. He's a very big LGBT advocate, and he's done a lot of really good stuff in the past. He likes to mix up conventions, and this is probably my favourite gag in the entire episode, and probably the entirety of Doctor Who ever, was the fact that they had Mickey say, "Don't think that's going to stop me," and then the bloke screams, and you'd expect by convention that the woman would be the one who would freak out, but it's the bloke that screams.
Funny. And I think what I love about it is that shot is so well framed that you've got the doctor's kind of forearms, Mickey's head, and this couple, and you really don't notice the couple at first. They're just kind of background.
You're focused on the head,
and then all of a sudden he screams, and you look up and you're like,
because it's framed in such a way to think that the woman is the more prominent, more prominent in the right hand side of the frame. But the fact that it's the bloke that screams,
funny.
It's just they added some really good humour in. They didn't add humour for the sake of just, it's the doctor being silly, like they kind of did with Matt Smith. It's just they added genuine bits of humour into this. It's kind of like how they do humour in the MCU. They don't.
Yeah.
There are moments where it's kind of forced, but most of the humour that lands in the Marvel movies, it's actually good jokes in not necessarily kind of serious situations, but they work. They even in what would be considered a non-funny film, and that's what happened. It works so well in
Doctor Who is a drama, but it has these little
lighter moments, and it kind of, again, it introduces you to this side of the Doctor that is quite funny at times. And so they do this, and then they're chased out of the restaurant by Mickey, and we finally see the interior of the 2005 TARDIS.
Oh, what a beautiful reveal. I was thinking when I watched this, so when we literally just watched it, I wasn't sure how, when she runs into the box, and she first sees it, you see her reaction to what she's seeing, but you don't see what she's seeing. And I think that's really, really well done in the fact that she suddenly runs out because it's like, no, this is too much. Everything you've just told me, no, this is too much. And then she's running around the box, and then she goes back in, and then you see it. It's I really like the way that plays out because it gives you the chance to process.
Yeah.
Like a tease. You process what she's seen before you get to see it. And I think that eases you in much better because then she does the whole, it's bigger on the inside than the outside. And then you go, oh, yeah, that did just happen, didn't it? You experience it together, which is instead of just her running in and it being oh, this is what? And then her doing the run around outside thing.
Yeah. Because you get the sort of blue glow, you get the ambience. It's a shame that they revealed the TARDIS in the trailers for the series.
Did they?
Yeah, in the series they revealed the trailer. They revealed the TARDIS in the opening of the first trailer for the series, which is I can kind of get because I think a lot of people would be interested to see how the TARDIS would look. Maybe they wouldn't expect it to be any different. Maybe the fact that they revealed it in the trailer gives them that essence of knowing it's going to be different and it's not going to look like it did.
A drawing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a big draw.
Got in store.
This is something different. It's something new. Because I don't know whether it's wholly implied in the early series that this is a continuation. because obviously there's nothing that really screams at you, especially in episode 1, that says this is a continuation. I think when you get to episode 6, when you get to Dalek and you hear more about the Time War, that's when it reiterates that this is a continuation of what came before. So then the TARDIS is revealed to Rose. We get to see it as well, which is this beautiful, like very sort of cold blue, turquoisey approach, but it's all very like, I think they called it coral was the best way to put it across the non like glowing aesthetic of the TARDIS. They really made the TARDIS a living thing, because as much as it is the same TARDIS as the one that was in the original series, as in it's the same machine, but obviously it's got a different desktop theme, which was the running joke that continued throughout the rest of this reboot. But they made it more a living creature, and they really do play up on the living aspect of the TARDIS towards the end of this series. And kind of, I mean, again, I'm just a sucker for Series 1 with Eccleston, but I love this TARDIS.
Oh, this TARDIS is beautiful.
And I think it's down to the fact that I think the first remodeled TARDIS after this one, I think, is awful.
I'm really glad that they didn't remodel it for David. Like, David's stuck with this TARDIS. I think, obviously, because Eccleston only ended up doing one series, it was sort of like, well, we've got this beautiful set, we might as well keep using
rebuilding it entirely.
I'm really glad we got like 4 or 5 series of this set all together.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't hate the next TARDIS. Well, obviously, we'll get onto that when it comes to
Series 5.
I quite liked it, but this TARDIS is just so warm and inviting, and it sort of makes you...
It's inviting enough, but it's also got the cold, like, alien aspect to it.
But it sort of becomes like weirdly like a second home. Like
it becomes a character, which you don't really see as much in the old series. Like, when you go back and look at the old stuff, as much as so much of the original serial in 1963 takes place in the TARDIS, as the series progressed, you don't see it as frequently. Like, it's not a guaranteed every episode thing. Like, I've seen people complain about that.
No, I don't think it needs
even in the new series, like, the TARDIS didn't appear in this episode. So like,
you know it's there.
Yeah. So the fact that we get to see like enough of it in this, I think we only really see the interior of it like once properly, when Rose is in there, when they chase after the Nestine signal from Mickey's head. That's like, I think that's pretty much the only time in the whole episode you see the interior of the TARDIS until the beginning of episode 2. So, which again is like on purpose, obviously. Yeah, it's deliberate. Yeah, no, I do really enjoy that. So, and it's great to see it. Like I said, I love this TARDIS so much. I think it is still one of my favourites. Maybe Capaldi's version of the clinical TARDIS second. No, see, I didn't like Capaldi's. Was it his first or second TARDIS? The warm one. His TARDIS was always warm. No, I just didn't really like either of his TARDISes. Fair enough. I really like David's, and I do kind of like Matt's, but Capaldi's was sort of like meh for me. Fair enough, but no, I love this TARDIS. Like I said, the living aspect of it. So then the Doctor chases the signal from a melty Mickey through to the bridge, which if I remember rightly, after watching Doctor Who Confidential again, this bridge sequence where they're running across the bridge and looking at the London Eye, that was the first thing they shot, I think, of the new series. Recall that information somewhere. So that shot of them running along the bridge is like 10:30, and they have 2 London buses behind them as they run along the bridge hand in hand. And we were watching it, and I went, what's the likelihood that they just have 2 London buses behind them? Yeah, which, funnily enough, they did that shot so many times. They waited so long to get a London bus in the back of that shot because they wanted a London. They're running along Westminster Bridge, for goodness sake. That's a really iconic bridge in Doctor Who, because the Daleks were on it back in 1964. But again, it's Doctor Who. It's a British institution. Yeah. So they're gonna London bus. They're gonna Brit it up. So yeah, they waited for ages to get that shot, and obviously they got 2 buses back to back. Amazing. So I think they were just waiting in place, like Christopher and Billy at one end of the bridge, and then the crew on the other end with the cameras, and just go, "There's 2 buses. Go. And so I think that's the first thing they talk about. And even with like introducing new things to the characters, when Rose asks him what's a police public call box, he just says it's a phone box from the 1950s. It's a disguise. That's all he says. It's only until no info about chameleon circuits. Only until Boomtown, which is episode 11. Come on, test your knowledge. Yes, episode 11, that we find out about the chameleon circuit, which again is something was known in Classic Who, but is not brought up again until now. So that's why Series 1 is such a a needed watch. I find it baffling that people skip it.
People don't watch it.
I get that Tennant is amazing. He's a brilliant doctor.
But Eccleston is fabulous.
But Eccleston's great.
Fantastic.
And there's so much you learn from it. That's why when people when I've spoken to people about whether they've watched Doctor Who before, it's not like my go-to conversation if I meet a new person.
Excuse me, have you watched Doctor Who?
Have you watched Doctor Who? Loads of people say I started on series 2 with David Tennant and watched through to the end of maybe either the end of Tennant or the end of Matt Smith and then stopped. And it's well,
you're missing out.
You are missing out on a bit more heft behind the character if you've not watched series 1 and even just explaining, because also they don't explain the chameleon circuit again.
No,
even with new companions, they don't keep explaining it because we would get pretty sick of it if they. I mean,
the thing is, also what I love about the fact that he kind of answers Rose's questions in a very brush over manner, but enough to just appease her, sort of so what's a police public call box? Oh, it's a police box from the 1950s as discussed. Okay. And then she moves on to the next thing. It sort of gives the audience enough information to be yeah, but why is it a police box from the 1950s? And that creates then that intrigue of wanting to watch the next episode to sort of psychologically, you sort of I want to know why he's in a police box from the 1950s.
Unlike
I want to know about this, I want to know about this.
Future Who, there's not masses that's left just open. If they bring up something that might be important later, then it will be important later. There's still things in the most recent series that I'm still waiting to hear about, which I'm assuming we will. Where the in Resolution, when there's that building, that company with the very Dalek-y looking symbol on the front, where they managed to get parts for this rebuilt reconnaissance Dalek, whether that's going to reappear
probably just fan service.
Whether it's going to be reappearing in Revolution of the Daleks at Christmas this year, I don't know, but it's stuff like that gets left up in the air. But with series 1, they really do give you a full painted picture of the character before he regenerates into a new body. So series 1 is genuinely the best place to start because it tells you so much more than you would know just from watching Tennant through. As much as we hear more about Gallifrey with Tennant in series 3,
it's not necessary to the character.
It's not necessary yet. So it's always worth watching series 1 for that. So they track the Nestine down to underneath London. There's this fantastic sequence of Eccleston working out where the dish is, and again it's that sort of that silly, whimsical alien nature of the Doctor showing again that we last saw in Rose's flat when he's what? Looking at the London Eye.
What?
Like a dish, like a wheel, slap bang in the middle of London, must be completely invisible.
He knows it's the London Eye.
It takes him 3 glances to realise that that's what Rose is talking about. It's the London Eye, you idiot. It's there.
What I love about that scene is she doesn't say a word. She literally just raises her eyebrows and does a subtle nod
It's if they did that in the most recent series, I would have, if we had the current Doctor and the current companions, Yaz would have gone, the London Eye, that's it. And the Doctor goes, yes, it's the London Eye.
Oh my God,
did you know that was built in 1999 or whatever it was, whenever it was built for the millennium or something, and she'd go off on one. They do so much more with so little. The expositionary things they do in such a different way, and that's why series 1 is so good. Even though there are moments when in series 1, episode 11 more specifically, where they do just give you a bunch of exposition in one go, they deliberately do it in such a way to make it sound dumb.
Yeah.
Which again we'll get to, which I will hopefully, if I remember to call back to this episode of the podcast when we get to episode 11, then you'll know what I mean. So they go down and you see the Nestine consciousness for the first time in God knows how many years. I think the Autons only appeared in
You missed out on Eccleston's classic line. That's where we get the first ever fantastic.
Very true. First ever fantastic, his catchphrase. Because I think the Autons only appeared in 2 stories prior to this.
I'm aware.
Spearhead from Space and Terror of the Autons. I might be wrong. I feel like there might be another one, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So you'll have to let us know on social media, or if you're listening to this on the YouTube version in the comments.
If we're very wrong about that.
If we're very wrong, but I think there's only 2 appearances. But so we see the Nestine consciousness, who's turned into this big lava ball with kind of a face, sort of a face. There are moments when you kind of see a nose and a mouth, which is a bit strange.
One thing I always question here is Mickey is oh my God, that thing, it can talk, and yet you never hear a word of English out of its mouth.
No.
The Doctor can communicate
Admittedly,
with it.
It does say Time Lord.
Does it?
It does you can hear a very raspy Time Lord. I think it's when...
But how would Mickey be oh my God, it talks it doesn't speak English, clearly.
I think it means... I think he's looking at it and thinking it's it's just it's speaking a language.
Yeah.
But I think when he says it talks, I don't think he means that as in it's communicating. I think it's more of it's alive.
Oh, right. Yeah,
I think
suppose.
maybe I think rather than give Mickey the line, Rose, it's alive, it's a living thing. It's like, duh.
Yeah.
Like, obviously.
No.
But the idea that it can talk is a bit different. Because again, back in the classic series, I can't remember whether it does talk, whether it's talking through like a computer or a person in the original series. I've not seen the original Terror of the Autons stuff. I've seen bits and bobs of it. I'm not entirely sure, but... And then it's also the idea that the Doctor can communicate with it and can understand it. Obviously, he's got. I think it is Eccleston has a line about having a billion languages. I can't remember what episodes it's in.
Isn't it also then you get obviously later on, like, you know, spoilers, but the TARDIS translating thing, like, that's not prevalent in this episode. That's and I think that's really kind of.
Actually, do you know what? It's not even in. No, sorry. I was about to say, that only appears in the Christmas Invasion, but that's the realization that the Doctor's woken up again when it's like, I only speak Sycoraxic. Yeah. But it does, you're right. There is that whole TARDIS translates thing, and as much as Rose has been in the TARDIS at this point, obviously doesn't translate it yet.
She's not been in there long enough.
It might actually be in this next episode. I think it is actually,
because
I
quite like
aliens.
that because it's sort of like it promotes the fact that it's an alien and like the Doctor can communicate with this alien.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. And like you said, it doesn't sort of it gives you the mystery of like why can he understand this nesting consciousness that basically sounds like
yeah, it's just making noises and he can understand it perfectly. There's obviously the Nestine finds his ship and he goes, oh god, that's higher technology, we're going to start the invasion now. And then the shop window dummies wake up and Clive and his family are, you know, funnily enough, walking through a shopping centre at this point.
Shopping.
And he's just like, it's all true. And the Auton flicks its hand down and shoots Clive in the face.
His face when he
Clive.
realises he's going to die, and he's literally just like, no, come on.
Yeah, he's like, I know that death follows the Doctor around, because he says that to Rose.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes, it is all true, the Doctor is back. And then he sees the thing come down, he goes, oh yeah, there's death too. Crap.
Yeah.
And obviously, we don't know whether his wife and kid survives.
I think so, because I think we see them running off in the street at the end.
Maybe.
And
just on a little segue about Clive, I think that's a real shame. A lot of people, there's a couple of like meme accounts on Twitter I follow of Doctor Who that kind of take the piss out of Clive a little bit. But I think Clive as a character could have been really interesting to crop up very occasionally throughout the course of the series, or at least the Russell T Davies era run, because I'd love the idea of there being this like Doctor obsessive, not so much like Osgood.
Oh yeah.
Who is very much the representation of the fangirl in the series, as much as Osgood is a fantastic character. More of just this odd man who's obsessed with the Doctor.
Just pottering around.
Yeah, and just occasionally cropping up again. Like, imagine if there was an episode in the future, say something like School Reunion in Series 2 when Sarah Jane Smith comes back, where it's not Sarah Jane, it's Clive, because he's searching all this thing and he's trying his best to find the Doctor after Rose supposedly disappears.
If he just happens to be in the background of a shot somewhere and it's sort of like, oh my god, there's Clive, and it's like a little Easter egg thing.
Here's Clive. I think that'd have been really cool to see him crop up again, or just like towards the end, or they need help from someone who can know things and bits and pieces about the Doctor, and lo and behold, they ring up Clive and he's back in his shed. Like, I think that the idea that he's got all of this work and he just goes up in smoke at the end of the episode, it's quite a shame. It's one of the things I think, looking back, as much as I said I'm very biased, I could criticise about.
But then I suppose also it sort of puts into perspective the danger of things, because
absolutely.
Like he says it himself, like the Doctor's constant companion is death, and Rose is like, is it always going to be this dangerous? It's like she's literally, I mean, she doesn't know he's died, but we, as from an audience perspective, we do. It sort of really sort of puts into perspective for us how dangerous it actually is. Like, this guy literally met Rose once, and oh god, he's dead now. Like, and you know, Rose is traveling with the Doctor all the time. That could be her any second. Like, I mean, obviously you get that throughout. Like, the mortal peril thing is a very constant theme. But like, for him, he was just a passing character, and I think that sort of really puts into perspective how dangerous these things are. Like, they don't care who they kill, they just kill whoever and whatever.
Yeah, so I think losing Clive was a bit of a shame, because it would have been cool to see him crop up again, but again, you are right, it shows off that
just loved to see him in the background of the cafe in like Boomtown, you know, in that very first, is it Boomtown, when they're sat in the cafe all having a laugh and a joke
in
or
Cardiff,
whatever. Yeah,
and Clive's
he's
there
just
behind
in
the
the
newspaper, just
background.
like,
That would have been so
oh my god, it's him. Like, or just seeing him like crop, kind of like how when the Doctor meets Malcolm Lee Evans in Planet of the Dead, and he's like, oh, I love you, and he gives him a hug, and he's like, it's you, it's really you. And kind of like, sort of like, I mean, then again, now I'm talking about that, you have Linda in series 2, which we'll get to, Love and Monsters, which is quite an iconic episode of Doctor Who for very many reasons.
Wait, what?
Linda.
Love and Monsters?
Love and Monsters, Linda. The organisation, not the person.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm thinking of Linda from
the end of the
series
series.
1 from
when they try and track down the Doctor in the end. Like, that kind of thing is interesting. But again, yeah, losing Clive was a shame.
Poor
so
Clive.
yeah, they defeat the nesting consciousness and they continue on, and Mickey's all a bit shaken up as he is, and he's just been in the TARDIS. You don't see him in the TARDIS for the first time. There, you see him in the TARDIS towards the middle of the series.
No, I think that was done very specifically to sort of keep it very personal between
They don't need to show him reacting to it.
Like,
he's
we've
just a
already
bit
had
shaken.
that as an audience sort of trope. We don't need to see someone else reacting to the TARDIS.
And to be honest, reacting to the TARDIS got a bit old.
Yeah.
Like, especially when they tried to mix it up with Clara saying it's smaller on the outside, and it's like, okay, funny. Whatever. But yeah, so then it gets towards the end, and Jackie's been out, she nearly dies, and thankfully she's okay. And the Doctor offers Rose the companion position. And obviously this is the first proper point when you can look at this, when you look back on this series and this episode, after you know it, all the things that happened between 96 and now, and all the stuff that's going to happen in the future. And the Doctor offers Rose the chance, the trip of a lifetime, as he says in the first trailer, to go about the stars and see anything you want to do. You can stay here and eat chips, go to bed, or you can go anywhere. And she says no. And you see the Doctor really, he just completely drops.
I think it's a really, really subtle thing as well, though, because like Eccleston goes from being sort of like, oh, you could, come with me if you like, and he has the hope in his voice, but his face stays very stock still. And then when she says,
even when he says,
I
like,
can't,
is it always this dangerous? He's like, yeah. He's excited about the fact it's dangerous.
But then she's sort of like, no, I can't. And you just sort of see him go, okay. And it's his voice that gives you that,
and
like...
as you say, even he just seems to drop. I think it even looks as if he sort of takes half a step back, and he sort of darkens into the shadow of the TARDIS.
And you can see her, like, itching to go, but she's like, oh,
I've got to take care of it. And she quite literally's like, I've got to take care of this lump. Like... and obviously as the series progresses and you realise how long it's been for the Doctor since he's been with a companion, it's so well mapped out that you knew what Russell was going for with his 4. Obviously, I don't know how many series he was on for initially, but obviously he did 4 series as the showrunner and the specials, which kind of constitutes as like
a fifth-ish,
because it was Tennant's last couple of episodes were all specials. So seeing that happen, especially when you know how things were for him, it's honestly heartbreaking.
It's like this is the first companion, or the first person he's put his kind of trust into.
He's opened up to them.
In like the most subtle way, because I mean, like the fact that he even told her who he was in the first place,
and he was still vague about it. Apart from the only blunt answers he gave was, "Are you an alien?" Yes. Yeah. That's basically it. Otherwise, he gave very mystical, mythical almost answers to questions.
You
Rose
can just see him sort of being like, "Oh, okay, well, people only ever let you down, then, don't they?" And then leaves.
And then comes back and says, "Oh, it travels in time." And for some reason, that makes her change her mind, and that makes me think: does she initially think I can go and see my dad?
Personally, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it was by the way, did I mention it travels in time that convinced her? I personally think it was just the fact that he came back for her, because she's 19.
A second chance
she's
to say
not.
Yes.
Yeah, like in the first instance, that kind of long pause, because you do have that long pause. I mean, I say long. It was probably only a good few 10 seconds pause between them looking at each other and the camera flicking back and forth before she says no to his first question, of them looking at each other, and you can see that she wants to say yes. Like it's sort of like, oh, but I can't.
It's when Mickey grabs her and she's like, oh yeah, wait, I've got this idiot here.
And she's never had anyone, I say, apart from Mickey, but even Mickey's not really there for her. Like, he wants to go to the pub after her job's been blown up. Like, this is the first person, especially having lost her dad, that she ever has known to come back for her. And I think that is kind of the way that they put it. It's like, she really wanted to go. She said no, and then he goes, I'm going to give you a second chance. And she's like, yeah, do you know what? Screw it. Like, I might as well.
So she then runs off into the TARDIS in awkward slow motion. The door closes.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of had to, because if you have someone just running in normal speed, it's a little bit weird.
A bit abrupt,
isn't it?
yeah. It's very blatant, especially when the stinger comes in for the title sequence. It's like, yeah, this is very much the end of the episode, and the door closes, and we hit the next time thing, which was a new thing for Doctor Who. They didn't do that back in the old series, where they gave you a glimpse of what was coming next. So next week we have the end of the world, which is the Doctor and Rose on a space station watching the world end, quite literally. We'll also give you more of an idea as to what that will be when we actually get onto that next week. But obviously, if you've watched the episode, you've just seen the next time and seen what was happening. But Rose, as we've sort of discussed, is a really fantastic place to start the first episode back. Because this, rebooting the show is not an easy task by any stretch. Especially when there is, at this point, 25, nearly 30 years of lore already established about the Time Lords and the Doctor and all the races that we've seen who do recur through the series.
But also, it's not just 30 years of lore, it's 30 years of, fandom building. I know they're called fandoms now, that's a very modern thing, but, it's 30 years of generations of people that have watched Doctor Who from when it began, and have sort of come into this era and been like, oh, but this is starting up again. And it's sort of having to pay tribute to them, but also introduce it to a whole new audience. And I think Russell T Davies did that so well.
The balance is so well done, and as you're saying, the fan base, the presence being there, it was always there throughout the 90s. The Big Finish stuff, the audio dramas were unofficial, and then they sort of became official because they were so popular. Chris Chibnall, back in the day, was part of the Doctor Appreciation Society, and he appeared on TV talking about the show. Stephen Moffat was always writing fan stuff, and he wrote the Curse of Fatal Death, which was aired in 2002, 2001 maybe, or 99 for Comic Relief with Rowan Atkinson as the Doctor. That was written by Stephen Moffat, so
I've not actually seen that.
He had his feet in the show, or foot kind of in the show. Nicholas Briggs was picked up for the voice of the Daleks and various... I mean, he's actually the Nestine Conscious as well.
Is it?
Yeah,
cool.
That's Nick Briggs. And he was picked up because he did Dalek voices in the Big Finish audio plays. And now he's become
the classic Dalek.
He's I don't know whether he had a part in launching Big Finish. He might have done, but I know he's a big producer on the audio stuff. And obviously he plays a bunch of roles in Doctor Who, mainly voice roles, but he has appeared in Torchwood as himself. He was part of the parliamentary cabinet during Children of Earth. He's in that.
Nice.
So he became a huge part of the show because of that following that was still present through the 90s. We'll get to this eventually, but An Adventure in Space and Time by Mark Gatiss, he wanted to make that back on the 40th anniversary, which was obviously 2003.
Yeah.
He wanted to make that documentary, that docudrama back then, but he didn't get the green light to do it until 2013.
Well, I mean, I suppose in 2003, you never know where the show is going to go.
Exactly, the show was still in complete hiatus.
Yeah,
but I think it was either late 2003 or very early 2004. I want to say it was 2003 when the BBC press office revealed they were rebooting the show.
Yeah, well, by then they would have hopefully filmed it or started production.
After the huge uproar of people on the 40th anniversary of the show, seeing how popular it still was, and I think the Big Finish stuff picking up as well, that pointed the BBC to look at it and go, okay, maybe we could give this another go. And as I said earlier, Michael Grade, who just crapped on the show back in the 80s, even he enjoyed the reboot series. I don't know how much of the reboot series he watched, but he watched Rose and he liked it.
Well,
that was somebody who hates sci-fi. And, like I said, the person who killed the show off back in the 80s, but he liked it.
But we're not bitter.
Yeah, not at all. No Doctor Who fan is bitter about Michael Grade. They definitely are.
I mean, to be fair, though,
him.
I sort of feel like maybe I know that it was a bad thing that we did at the time, and in hindsight we can sort of sit there and go, he's the bad guy, but actually we wouldn't have got this amazing reboot and New Who and stuff if things hadn't happened the way they happened. It might be a bit of a poo head, but
if the film hadn't have flopped in 96, then we wouldn't have had the reboot either. We'd have had some weird American reboot that would have changed a lot of things.
How about we do?
And I say in a video, I think it's out yet actually. I don't think no, it's not. Bit of a tease there for a video I've got coming out soon, about what the show would have been if it was picked up in 96 after the movie. It would have been very strange, and the Brits probably would have hated it because it would have been American run. American run Doctor
Ew.
Who. Not really too keen on that idea. No. But that was Rose, Series 1, Episode 1, 26th of March 2005.
Woohoo!
That was 15 years ago. Like just over 15 years ago, because it's currently the 17th of May today. Yes, 17th of May.
Okay.
2020 that we've started this podcast.
Wow.
So that has been the first ever episode of Escaping Kasterborous.
Yay.
Which makes sense to Doctor Who people. The term Escaping Kasterborous.
I mean,
to non-Doctor Who people, probably not so much.
You sort of say that, but even my sister was like, "What's Kasterborous?"
I mean, it's not like Tennant says it about 50 times during his series, but we'll get there.
The constellation of Kasterborous.
But yeah, let us know what you thought about this. You can find us on social media. I'm currently trying to get access to the old WhoCulture Twitter account that was made for WhatCulture back in the day, but we can't seem to get back in. Fun fact. So we're trying. I'm in the process of contacting Twitter to get that up and running again. But if you want to talk to us on social media, give us some opinions of what you thought about the episode. You got any ideas for things you want to hear on these episodes? Because we're kind of going into this pretty blind.
Yeah.
If you've got any ideas for things you want to hear us talk about these particular episodes, then please do come and find us on social media. You can find me on Twitter at pickupchangetoe.
And me at Ames_Elizabeth.
Yes, I'm sure I'll put these on the tweets as well when we release the first episode, which hopefully will be at some point during the week after we've recorded this, because we're still in the process of getting this on board with Acast, which should be really good. But next week, as I said, we'll be continuing with The End of the World, Series 1, Episode 2. Great episode. Again, Series 1 is just immaculate the whole way through, in my opinion, but that's just, I'm a bit biased about that. But thank you very, very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've new to the series entirely, please let us know what you thought about Rose. Not so much, I mean, about the podcast too, but also about Rose over on the socials. Thank you all very much for listening. I have been Rich.
I have been Amy.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.